Thank you. I think many of you used the term failed state. And I have to say that sometimes I think we are beyond that. That's why those that refer to the need to use the limited time we have, it might be days or hours, not weeks or months, to avoid a total collapse, are right. It's a rich country in terms of resources. Still, it's a country that can represent a perfect storm, perfect mix of risks. Let me just name a few of them. One of the highest concentrations of arms per meter, oil and gas and revenues, so potentially a lot of money ready to be used by different actors, an instrumental use of religion to spread acts that are close to terror, no control of the borders, land borders and sea borders, so a flow of asylum seekers and refugees and migrants that is not in the control of any authority on the ground, a humanitarian catastrophe, an environmental disaster ready to happen, as some of you mentioned, and a risk of spillover in the neighbouring countries. Think of Tunisia, how many refugees Tunisia is receiving constantly. We always concentrate, and being of an Italian nationality, I do it myself very often, on how many people we are receiving in Europe, but let's just think of how many people the neighbouring countries are receiving in more difficult situations than our European Union member states are. So, very right to be extremely worried and to be very clear, there's no illusion, and we should have no illusion about the fact, I'm sorry that many of your colleagues left now, but there is no illusion on the fact that we can stay away from Libya. We can stay away from Libya, but Libya is not going to stay away from us. So the point is how to make sure that we have a rational, helpful hand to try and avoid the total collapse, because this is going to touch us in one way or another. And let me express all my condolences and solidarity to the families and also to the authorities of Greece and Romania for the loss of 2 members of the crew of a tank that was attacked a few days ago. I had on the phone the very same day the foreign ministers of Romania and Greece to express my condolences, but this is showing exactly the fact that in one way or another this is going to affect our security and the security of the region and the security of the world. So even if we want to stay, even if we wanted to stay away, and I'm not sure this is the right and wise thing to do in any case, I don't think this would be possible at all. The point is, what do we do to support a positive process? I think that many of you mentioned, almost all of you mentioned, what should be the outcome of a process. A Libya that is not divided, a ceasefire immediately, a structured dialogue for a sort of national reconciliation, getting to a national unity government or some sort of transition structure that can guarantee some sort of government to the country. But while we are listing these elements of a framework, of an horizon, we also have to know very well and to be clear on that even the talks that are taking place tomorrow in Geneva, even the simple convening of a meeting has so huge difficulties we could not even imagine. And it's just by working on this every day, almost every hour, that you realise how difficult it is to even decide who to invite to a meeting, who has to sit on a table and who has to sit on a different table, how to set the agenda, how to define the further steps. Even calling for a meeting is a major diplomatic challenge. So no illusion also on the difficulties of the exercise. And I think we have to bear that in mind when we reflect on the further steps, which is the role of the neighbours and the role of the European Union. Now, many of you asked, and some of you asked about the role of Algeria, for instance, or other countries in the neighbourhood. in the neighbourhood. First of all, we have to be aware of the fact that there is not one single attitude of the neighbours. There are different attitudes of different neighbours, and the neighbours are very different themselves, very much. That's why I believe, and again I would say the role of the European Union in this is to go hand in hand with the United Nations, because we need the United Nations frameworks to reconvene all these differences into something that makes sense in view of support of a process internally. But in order to shape all these differences in the neighbourhood, which are crucial, in something that makes sense to support, the exercise has to be done with the appropriate organisations. That's why the efforts we're doing is not EU Libyans. It's EU Arab League, EU Arab League African Union, EU Arab League African Union, different formats of the neighbours. I won't bother you with all the different formats. Constantly talking to all, especially those that have different attitudes, being that the Egyptians or the Emirates or the Turkish or the Algerians or the Qataris or others, or some of the African countries that are neighbours as well. When I said in the beginning, maybe for the first time now we have a slightly more constructive and positive attitude by the neighbours in their totality, is maybe because we are all realising that we are running out of time, and this is the last chance also for us, for the regional community and for the international community, to show a certain sense of responsibility for what is happening there. And the only way of keeping the region united is working on this multilateral level and approach. Now, when it comes to the role of the European Union, I believe that our role has to be better defined when we will see, the day after tomorrow, whether these efforts for dialogue are going to produce something or not. We can put a lot on the table there. In one sense or another, we have different scenarios on the table. And when I say it depends on the Libyans to define the scenario, it also depends on the Libyan reaction to see what kind of instruments the European Union will put in place and will be able to put in place. If we have a start of a process of dialogue and reconciliation, or a unity government, then obviously, or a ceasefire starting to take place, then obviously the European Union could work towards measures and instruments to monitor achievements that are reached on the ground. We have to think of the review of the mandate of EUBAM Libya for sure. The mandate is expiring in May, so we have time, and that's why, exactly why, we are taking this discussion with the ministers on Monday, with some options on the table on what can we do in one case, positive developments we can monitor and support, or in the event of a lack of positive development, a total lack of a positive development, what kind of instruments we could have to pressure for an engagement that could be possible, or to implement or to work on implementing fully some of the UN Security Council resolutions that for the moment are on paper but not fully implemented. I think that we are living now in a very strange bubble, which is the fact that we have this 24-48 hours where this last chance of dialogue is hopefully taking place, and to see if this starts a positive dynamic. And we will have to be flexible. We use this word sometimes on different scenarios, also in foreign policy. You have to be flexible. You have to have clear in mind what your potential is, and we have a huge potential in all scenarios to play. And we have, I think, to take stock of what will happen or not in Geneva in the coming hours, and define how we can better either push in one direction or support in the results that the Libyans would have achieved once this happens. Obviously, we also have to get ready to our action if the scenario is the worst possible one, and we are working on that as well. But I would not take this discussion today, and I thank you for not having this discussion today, because I think that today is the day of sending to the Libyans and to the region and to the rest of the international community a clear message. This is the last chance for dialogue, and we should not and we cannot waste it. Whatever we can do afterwards, we are getting ready to that. You have always to get ready for the worst case scenario. But today is the day of pushing for the worst case scenario to be avoided, and that is in the responsibility and in the hands of the Libyans in this very same hour. So I really thank you for a good debate, I think, for a message that can come strong from here to the Libyans, that we are there ready to support because we care, because we know it's in their own interest, but it's also in our interest, in the interest of the region's stability. We have instruments to do that, but again, the decision has to be their own decision. And I really hope that the message from here comes clear and strong to all parts of Libya in these hours, that the national dialogue, a common engagement needs to take place. There is no alternative to that. All other options are getting Libya a step closer to a total collapse, and we cannot, and the Libyans cannot afford it. Thank you very much.